Good morning, everybody. My name's Dave Erickson. I'm a distinguished architect at Elastic. In preparation for this meeting, GovCIO was fantastic. We did all the prep, we strategized, and we thought, what are the real important things to come away with? But we spent more time, I think, than anything on whether or not my headshot is the correct headshot. My issue with it is that it's 10 years old. Their issue with it was it's too resolution. Let's get maybe a certain. No, I'm kidding. So I think we're in a fast-moving space, and it's very good to get education. It's very good to get training. But I think everyone comes to events like this hoping to walk away with some actionable advice, right? Some tips, some things that are the headlines, the walk away. I went here, and this crazy guy who's an engineer talking to GovCIOs suggested these things. And, if they're not actionable, maybe at least they get us thinking. So that's what this talk was meant to do. Scalability is a very important thing to think about. Scalability turned on its head is just efficiency, right? The amount of work that I can get down for the same amount of dollar. And when we think about efficiency, scalability, making sure that the things that we make with AI are sustainable, that we capture all the momentum and excitement of us now having these new tools and use them for the agency's purpose, the mission, but we're also being stewards of not only data, but taxpayer money, the governance, right, and the long-term sustainability of these energies so that we don't flame out on AI and miss out on some of the benefits. So Elastic is a search company. Search, that's the thing that most people are used to doing on the web, but it's also what you do on your data. We've been doing this for 10, 15 years or so, and we're seeing a world where search is becoming very relevant in the world of AI because one of the actions that AI agents or AI workflows or AI processes need to do is go after historical data at scale, going after not just kind of keyword search on it, but also the meaning of it. So everything we've been working on for the last 3 years since that oh wow moment of ChatGPT has been about making sure that we're building all the things that government, large industry, the startups of the world, right, we're used globally, that make sure that we have all those tools that people need to scale their access to knowledge efficiently in the new way that it's happening in this AI world. So I walk around, I talk to a lot of people, I get to go in and out of a lot of government buildings, and so the things that I'm overhearing in government have really changed just in this year. I've heard for years and years and years, oh yeah, but I can't do that because I don't have an LLM. Or I have an LLM, but I can't actually put any of my data in it, right? And that conversation is changing. The ATOs are starting to roll in, they're starting to make it into FedRAMP clouds, really capable ones. Also, the tools that we have for hosting a very private LLM are becoming much more capable, and this open source LLM, which really just means an open weight LLM that allows me to pull down the parameters and use something that was trained by somebody else, but use it with no phone home, just in an air-gapped environment. Those AIs are becoming very, very capable all of a sudden, just in this last year. And it's enabling a new string of momentum for government that maybe wasn't there before. So with the, fill in the three-letter agency of my agency, GPT, this little sandbox we've set up that lets us have a private conversation with whatever our LLM of choice is. Once that, often the very first sandbox, absolutely the best sandbox to get going as an early pilot because we get through some of the hurdles we might have internally of making sure that everyone and all of our stakeholders are pulled in and feel included in the process and have their chance to help us keep us on the right path. Once that's done, the next question is, why on earth does this thing cost this much? Can I give this to another department? What, nobody budgeted for that? Right? Or what data can I and can I not give to this AI? Let me look at the risk, the RMF for risk management for AI and start understanding that space. So we want to give some advice, and a lot of that advice is armed from real stories of those that have preceded us, right? The organizations and the companies, and oftentimes these are very code-centric companies. You heard it from Wole, right, that some of the most impressive use cases are looking at old COBOL code. That's something an engineer would think of to do, right? A lot of the early companies that have finished their full transition are very code-oriented, developer-oriented companies, just because the first thing the AI engineers think to do is solve their own problem. So this is one of those. Folks familiar with Stack Overflow? Stack Overflow is where we used to go to ask a really tough question and find that one person who solved it 3 years ago, or said, made a comment saying, I've almost got it. And it's like, 3 years ago person, where's the answer, right? Stack Overflow's revenue for their public website is dead. Right? Dropped off a cliff the second people realized that all this data had been mined and scraped and trained into AI chatbots, and they could get a faster, more reasonable, maybe even the code for it answer out of an AI that had been trained on this as a knowledge base. Someone took hundreds of millions of dollars and removed really the value of this experience. And the expectation is no longer this. It's no longer I go search and have to discombobulate all these answers, most of which are wrong, and apply them to my problem. I want AI's help doing that. So businesses are changing, right? So here's the CEO of Stack Overflow up on our website or YouTube talking about the rollout of their next thing, because the search on Stack Overflow was elastic 15 years ago, right? But the thing that they monetize now that really helps their organizations that want to move quickly with their own knowledge and projects and all that is RAG-based, retrieval augmented generation. So this new era of expectations is coming out, and more organizations are saying, if I were to do this again, how would I do it AI first? How would I do it so that I'm chatting and conversing with something that understands me and understands the context of my mission, my data, my project, whatever that happens to be. So this transition is playing out in the private sector, and we're starting to see the same beginnings of what we saw a couple of years ago in the private sector happen in the public sector because of the access to these reasoning and more capable LLMs, even in the air gap. So first, they said it was a training, they say it was a workshop. You've probably gotten badgered with these before in the morning. Everybody's been talking about the same vocabulary. Just to make sure I'm using the terms the same way. Large language model, that's the brain. That's the thing that takes an input and gives you a smart output based on something that it learned before somehow. How? Don't worry about it. But it's the brain of the operation. But it's also, it's like the fish in that Finding Nemo movie that can't remember anything, right? It has no short-term memory. It doesn't have any long-term memory. It's in read-only mode for the most part. If somebody's wrapped something around it that makes it remember something, it's because they've created a walled garden ecosystem for you to operate in and are taking away the control of how it remembers data. Next, we have these prompts. We've heard about prompt engineering. I don't think that's a job. But prompts are how we give context to that brain. And this is a very, very important thing to understand with regards to efficiency, because oftentimes the unit of cost of using an AI, a generative AI, is going to be in how much prompt with the associated payload context am I giving to the large language model. So I said that the LLM was read-only. So how do I give it new data? Well, you can fine-tune it, but often that makes it learn just kind of terminology. So the way that you give it access to private data is through something called an AI knowledge base. And they work in all kinds of different ways. You can make them agentified if you want, but it's a new kind of search. And this is what Elastic spends a lot of our time doing, making sure that for the right kind of data, we set up the right kind of AI knowledge base that can cooperate with the large language model and understand your data so that it can be put into a workflow, a process, or just chat, right? And then the last term, the most complex, confusing term, is AI agent. Who has strong confidence that they know what an AI agent is and isn't? I just got back from a conference with a whole bunch of very smart engineers in San Francisco, all these startups and all these founders. I still don't know. I think it's still changing, right? There's some fundamental principles we have, but if you're a serious web AI company, you probably put out 3 different agent frameworks this year already, and they probably all won't be here next year, right? That's how quickly things are being deprecated and put in the graveyard, as we say, of capabilities. But the principle there is solid. The principle is this for an AI agent. 2 years ago, when I went to a government chatbot, I was talking directly to the AI. And maybe it was running a search on the side to get a little bit more context, something like retrieval augmented generation, but I was asking the question, and the AI was dealing with the words that I said. Now in this agentic world, what we've learned is that the AI itself can use the research tools, the taking action tools, and other functions that we've agentified. It can do that better than the human can. So we're going to have an AI listen to the human, but then ask what they really mean. It's almost like a research librarian. A research librarian, you go and say, I'm looking for something on this. And they go, well, I know the topics of my library and I know how it's organized. So I can do that a lot faster than you can. You know the mission, I know how we organize the library, right? So an AI agent's job is to stand in between the human and all those resources, all those tools, workflows, other things, so that I can just chat with my assistant and it goes and does something that might be quite complex behind the scenes. So the promise of Gen AI is that I'm going to be able to do more things than I was doing before with data that the AI is not trained on, data that changes quickly, data that might have sensitivity, classification, or other handling requirements. Right? Just talking about AI and CUI at the same time opens up a whole world of like, where are you putting my data? Right? And that world still exists, but we have found solutions for this that are in production and are finding acceptance at all levels of classification and risk. So the first question we ask as a CIO in government is, I have all of this data, I have mountains of it. It's all in different silos perhaps. I have expert users that are institutional knowledge that I'm worried about keeping that institutional knowledge. How do I expose this data to AI safely, efficiently, with good governance? And we've got this emerging agentic pattern of saying, I'm going to have an app or a front end, or I'm going to use Copilot, and I'm going to have this agentic helper that is the smart AI, and it's going to make use of tools. There are tools that do things, but there are also tools that know things. So I want to give that AI memory. So it's not every time I open up the window, it's a brand new conversation, that it knows me, it knows my data, and knows what I've been up to, and it has all that context because I'm controlling what it remembers in the short term in a conversation, and I'm remembering what it thinks of as grounding truth for the world, the global data that it has. That's two different kinds of memory. Elastic is a search engine. We get used for that long-term kind of memory. So we've got these two challenges, new framework, and everyone's excited to sell me something, and the fundamental problem we've had for years now with AI, which is how do I bring my government data to AI securely and safely? So let's get into the tips, the walk-away tips. These are the questions that I wish every government CIO went back and asked their users, asked their champions, asked the people that they're trying to take good care of, asked their constituents, whatever it happens to be. So the first one is, recognize that most of your users' experience with AI is with these consumer, public, help me plan my vacation based on data only on the public internet, and I'm accepting of all kinds of answers because no one's holding me accountable for that answer being perfect. But when I get into the work context, AI disappoints very quickly because you learn that while I can ask, hey, what's an example of a good restaurant? I can't say, add up the revenue of all those restaurants for me only within this, with the EBITDA, doing all this accounting stuff. It can't answer the same kinds of questions I have at work. It's not built for that. So it disappoints quickly and people, exit themselves out of the conversation pretty quickly. So I want for each use case to ask, what data do you wish AI understood perfectly? And just see what folks say, get them talking. And often that teaches us what we need to help AI solve the problem. We had a user that just went live. I think almost every government agency here is probably a user of them. It's DocuSign. DocuSign sits on billions of historical contracts that have been signed between two parties. When you're a lawyer and you take a new job, whether it's in government or not, the first question you have is, what on earth did we sign last year that I'm going to have to worry about? It's a knowledge question. Right? What they learned is the search on DocuSign wasn't particularly good. The search on Salesforce isn't particularly good. None of the searches for where the people store these contracts were particularly good. And so there's a lot of risk and uncertainty acting as a legal counsel. So what DocuSign did with their ML team is they said, let's ask the users, what questions do the lawyers always have questions on? Say, well, what state was it in? How much money was it for? What kind of contract was it? What are the termination clauses? Very importantly, what are the termination clauses? What are the things that protect me or expose me to liability, right? And they could categorize those into about 25 questions. And they trained an ML model to go through and just answer those yes-no questions, or maybe the only possible answer is one of the 50 states and outlying territories or something. And they went and they enriched the data with ML, and then they said, instead of just asking the lawyer's question directly to the search, we'll have the AI ask a better question, formatting it, knowing we've enriched it with the answers to these questions. And the results are suddenly incredibly better. And they've exposed it not as a chatbot, because lawyers hate chatbots. They've exposed it as a search, so the lawyer can form their own opinion of whether or not this is the contract that they were looking for. So they've used all these AI techniques and brought it closer to the question that the users are actually asking. So go to your users and ask them, what do you wish AI had perfect understanding of? Why would that help you in your job? Quantify that for me. And now I know what it's worth for us to go throw some AI at this problem, so I don't bring an overblown solution to a small problem that maybe is solvable some other way. Second tip, numbers every government CIO should know. So I want you to ask the question of, this thing that we're building, what would be the cost of asking 1 million questions a day? You think, how am I ever going to ask 1 million questions a day? Well, if the robots are asking them, you're going to get to 1 million pretty quickly. Right? Some of you have agencies that have 350 or so million users. Right? Every person in the United States potentially maybe has a question they might want to ask, not all on the same day, but maybe during filing period or whatever your kind of Black Friday event is. You might have quite a few questions come in, right? And you want to know that you have a sense for the scale of cost. What is the unit of cost? Because I'm no longer talking about heavyweight infrastructure that I'm owning. I'm renting time on a supercomputer, right? Even ChatGPTs from many, many years ago are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of GPUs tied together with InfiniBand networking that couldn't exist anywhere other than Azure or Oracle Cloud, or one of these things is really built as an AI supercomputer, right? So I want you to ask this question and see what we get back. In the RAG use case, which we run into often, the unit of cost is the token. The search is relatively cheap. The AI inference to the LLM is relatively expensive. And the unit of cost is the token. That's kind of like the word of the prompt. Almost, it's similar to how many words are in the prompt, including like the payload context. I might send it from an example PDF. And I'm going to pay per million tokens. And those tokens go quick, right? Especially as I start working with lots of authoritative government data that might be changing prompt to prompt. So we can find the price sheet for these, whether it's OpenAI or an Azure or a Google. The prompt sheets are all getting pretty standardized now. But just to do an exercise, do a costing exercise of your options to understand what are we talking about if this thing needs to scale. So I took an example. I'm going to ask 1 million questions. The questions come from 1,000 PDFs. I've got a lot more than 1,000 PDFs. Those PDFs are 25 pages. Each page is 600 tokens. Right? Now I can start doing the math of, if I were to ask a question and the evidence I needed to show the AI was just one PDF file to get the right answer and ground it, what would that cost? So if I were just ask the AI, this is ChatGPT 4.1, newest, latest, and greatest with all the fancy stuff, all the prompt caching, all the acceleration, all the things that are built in there to save us money. If I were to just ask the AI without giving it the PDF, 1 million questions, $1,600 a day. Not too bad. Not too bad, right? If the robots are asking the question, I might get beyond 1 million at some point, but I've spent more money. Right? Great. But I didn't give it any extra context, so it's almost certainly hallucinating an answer. Don't like that. So that's sort of the counter example of just the question part of it, not the knowledge part of it. All right, now let's find the best PDF that actually answers the question, and I'm going to copy and paste that whole 25-page PDF and file in there. That's what a lot of tools are doing in the back end to try and get you the right answer. Not a paragraph that has the right answer. They don't know. So they just can send the whole thing. Well, now I'm up at $7,600 a day. It's a pretty big multiple, right? Especially if I have lots and lots of use cases all running in parallel. And this applies not just to if I'm hosting and using the tokens as an API. If I'm hosting my own GPUs, it's still the unit of scale because concurrency out of self-hosted GPUs is abysmal. Right? I have to rent lots and lots of them in parallel. And now I'm buying things a year that are idle most of the time. Right? So this is actually significantly cheaper than renting my own GPUs in most cases. There's a new technology out there called cache acceleration, which means the AI is going to remember the first parts of answering your question if the beginning of your question is the same as a question you asked within the last 10 minutes or so. This is really useful if we just keep referring back to the same PDF file over and over again, and the only thing that changes is the user's question. Right? So let's take an 80-20 rule. Well, let's apply the cache prompt cost, which is lower, and 80% of the questions. I know, I've saved about half the money. Fantastic. Good retrieval, though, what an actual researcher does is not send you an entire book and say, the answer is somewhere in here. They flip to the page and say, it's right here. And I can understand that. I can pre-index the answer. So the search part, the retrieval part, probably gets it down to a single page. Your answer's here. So if we manage our knowledge, pull down a single page, now we're talking closer to the original cost of just calling the LLM verbose. So have this comparison. Ask, if I'm doing an agentic thing, now for a single question, how many questions does it end up asking? 50? Oh boy. That's fine, but I have to understand why was it important for me to know this, and what does it cost me to ask a million human-generated questions a day? So tip 3 is citations make AI knowledge real. And you need to manage the life cycle of a citation the same way that you manage the life cycle of logging into a system or auditing something that's auditable, right? We talk about zero trust a lot. I want zero trust for your AI citations. Like, if you can't measure it and track it, it didn't happen. It just got hallucinated. Who knows where it came from? My team is certainly not, and a lot of them are engineers. Your team is not immune to AI slop. Under a pressure situation, on your worst day, sometimes you just copy and paste straight out of that chat bot and hit send. Right? And we have to create the culture and create the processes and maybe create the part on the form where I have to sign it with my name for accountability, right? To say, maybe this is partially AI slop, but I know the risk of that. I know this isn't that big of a deal. But maybe in this press release, I don't want to be citing things that were hallucinated. We have to know, where did this come from? Right? So our organizations are not immune to AI slop. In government, we'll probably get called out for it a lot faster than others. So we have to start building the culture and processes to understand, hey, I want you to use AI, but I want you to have a sense of authorship when it's coming and being used for a decision. So in this retrieval augmented generation world, which we've probably heard about today, we're going to something like a vector database to get the answer, the context, those pages of the PDF files that actually answer the questions. And as we start thinking about this in the context of scaling, I want to add traceability for this flow. So any citation that got used to answer a question that I care about, let's log it somewhere. Let's have the traceability for it. So when someone comes back and says, how dare you draw that conclusion? I can say, no. That conclusion was drawn from the data at the time. It's right here in the logs, best effort, right? This is what we did. This person followed the process. And maybe have another one, which is, okay, that one, they were just winging it. That system was not logged. That system was not audited. Well, I don't know where that citation came from. Right? That legal precedent that the AI hallucinated isn't tracked with the life cycle in my citation log the way that it should be. So ask for your systems to start generating this type of provenance for the knowledge that was used to generate an AI answer. It's not hard. It's that one extra step, but it is that step that gives you a little bit more understanding of the grounding of where your tip came from. Last tip, find your crawl, walk, run. For my customers who are emerging from that search world, right? You think of your patent examiner, your where it happens to be. Not everybody's ready to jump all the way to the end. Actually, most aren't. It wouldn't be appropriate for them to jump all the way to the end of their maturity curve, right? Because there are real consequences to maybe jumping too far to on certain use cases. But find your crawl, walk, run, and you will find more people come along on that journey with you, using them as stakeholders, incorporating them in, but letting them know that momentum is happening, right? There's not this wait till I retire and maybe I won't have to learn the new system. That mentality, in the AI world don't really work, right? There's a lot of benefits to thinking, what can I do to start incorporating before I get fully AI first? So you saw it with Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is somewhere in the middle there. Right? Even a company with deep pockets that wants to go make revenue and all that, they're even in the middle because they know their users want to interpret the data themselves. They just need help finding it faster, right? So they've moved from a search-based world into a chat-based world. Some of my users in things like military intelligence planning, where they just have way too much work to get done with a very small number of people that have, the access to the source data, they've jumped and progressed iteratively, quickly, all the way to the agentic planning tasks, where they have assistants that are going in full co-pilot, helping them look at cyber threats, helping them look at mission planning, helping them look at all these different tools that they have access to, and making decisions for them with that traceability. I would say for your use case, on top of asking what data do I wish AI really knew well, what's the cost of asking a million questions, where did that knowledge come from and did you trace it? And then also, all right, what does our crawl, walk, run look like? Because now I can express to all my stakeholders, not even the ones that aren't technical, what that's going to feel like and why it's good for them, why it's a win-win for everybody involved if we go through this journey together. So I'm Dave Erickson. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, that's my last slide. We've helped a lot of folks kind of go through that process, and I thank everybody for their time.